Assumptions harden into facts. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today not merely to listen, but to awaken, to remember a truth that has been quietly shaping our lives long before we were conscious of it. Each one of us has wondered at some point why certain patterns repeat, why the same obstacles appear in different forms, or why breakthroughs seem to come easily to some and not to others. We often search for answers in circumstances, in people, in luck or timing, yet the real cause has been operating much closer to home. Tonight, we are here to explore a principle so simple yet so powerful that once understood, it can never be unseen. Assumptions harden into facts. From the moment you wake up in the morning, you are assuming something about life. You assume how the day will go, how people will treat you, how capable you are, and what you deserve. These assumptions may feel harmless, even automatic, but they are far from neutral. They are creative forces. They shape your choices, influence your emotions, and quietly instruct reality on how to respond to you. Long before events unfold on the outside, they have already been accepted on the inside. What you experience later as fate or circumstance is often the delayed echo of an inner agreement you made long ago. We live in a world that teaches us to react, to wait for proof before believing, to demand evidence before trusting, to see before we assume. But life operates in reverse. The unseen precedes the seen. Every achievement, every relationship, every failure, and every success began first as a conviction held within. The inner world is not a reflection of reality. Reality is a reflection of the inner world. When this truth is ignored, people feel powerless. When it is understood, everything changes. Consider for a moment how often we limit ourselves not because of ability, but because of belief. We say, "This is just how life is," or "People like me don't get opportunities like that," or "I've tried before and it didn't work." These statements may sound reasonable, even realistic, but they are assumptions, and reality faithfully obeys them. The world does not argue with what you accept as true. It simply complies. This message is not about wishful thinking or empty positivity. It is about responsibility. It is about realizing that the power shaping your future is not external pressure, but internal posture. When you change what you assume to be true about yourself and your life, you alter the trajectory of your experiences. The process may be subtle at first, but it is precise and unstoppable. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward today, I invite you to listen not just with your ears, but with an openness of mind and heart. Question what you have been assuming. Observe the patterns it has produced. Because when you understand that assumptions harden into facts, you also discover something extraordinary. You are not here to endure life, you are here to shape it. The most powerful voice influencing your life is not the one you hear from others, but the one you speak to yourself every single day. Long before circumstances take form, before events line up, before opportunities appear or disappear, an inner conversation is already in motion. This silent dialogue is constant, automatic, and often unquestioned. Yet it is this very conversation that scripts tomorrow's experiences. What you repeatedly affirm inwardly becomes the blueprint from which reality builds. Life does not respond to your hopes or your fears alone. It responds to what you consistently assume to be true. Every thought you dwell on carries an assumption. When you think, "Things never work out for me," you are not merely describing a moment, you are declaring a law. The mind accepts repetition as truth, and once a belief is accepted, it seeks confirmation. This is why patterns feel so stubborn. They are not stubborn because life is against you, but because your inner narrative has been steady. The world, faithful and impartial, mirrors back the tone of your inner speech. If your inner voice speaks defeat, reality answers with delay. If your inner voice speaks confidence, reality rearranges itself to confirm that confidence. Most people are unaware that they are constantly prophesying their own future. They rehearse failure in imagination, argue mentally with people who are not present, and relive disappointments as if they are happening again. Each mental rehearsal is an assumption being reinforced. The mind does not distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. When you repeatedly experience something inwardly, the subconscious accepts it as real and works tirelessly to externalize it. This is why an unguarded inner conversation can quietly sabotage progress while appearing harmless on the surface. Your inner speech also defines your self-concept, the identity you live from. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your assumptions about who you are. If you secretly assume you are overlooked, life will find countless ways to overlook you. If you assume you are valued, respected, and favored, people will respond accordingly without knowing why. They are reacting not to your words, but to the invisible atmosphere your beliefs create. Self-concept is not arrogance or ego. It is the internal agreement you have made about your place in the world. Notice how quickly the mind jumps to conclusions when something goes wrong. A delay becomes nothing ever happens for me. A mistake becomes I always mess things up. These statements feel emotional in the moment, but they are also creative. They give form to future experiences of the same kind. What you declare in moments of frustration often becomes the very condition you later complain about. This is not punishment, it is precision. Life is simply matching your dominant assumptions. To change the direction of your life, you must first change the direction of your inner conversations. This does not require force, strain, or constant affirmation spoken aloud. It requires awareness. Begin to listen to what you say to yourself when no one else is around. Listen to the tone, the language, the conclusions you draw. Then gently but firmly redirect them. When the old narrative arises, replace it with a new assumption that aligns with where you want to be, not where you have been. Assume success even when evidence is absent. Assume favor even when circumstances are neutral. Assume growth even when progress feels slow. These are not lies, they are seeds. Just as a seed contains the full tree before it ever breaks the soil, an assumption contains the full experience before it manifests. The unseen stage is not empty, it is active. Every time you return to the chosen assumption, you water the seed. Every time you refuse to contradict it with fear or doubt, you strengthen its roots. There will be moments when reality appears to challenge your new assumptions. This is not failure, it is a test of persistence. Old beliefs do not dissolve instantly, they surface to be replaced. When you remain loyal to the new inner conversation despite temporary contradiction, you accelerate transformation. Reality eventually yields because it cannot sustain a conflict with a consistently held assumption. The inner always outlasts the outer. Your inner conversation is also where faith becomes practical. Faith is not blind optimism, it is disciplined inner agreement. It is choosing what you will accept as true before you see proof. When you speak inwardly from the end, calm, assured, confident, you remove desperation from the process. Action becomes natural, not forced. Opportunities feel aligned, not chased. This is the power of living from assumption rather than reaction. Every day offers countless opportunities to practice this law. In traffic, in conversations, in waiting periods, in challenges, each moment asks, what are you assuming right now? When you answer that question consciously, you reclaim authorship over your story. The future is not something you walk into blindly. It is something you mentally rehearse before it arrives. Your inner conversation is not small or insignificant. It is the quiet architect of your life. Speak wisely within, and the world will speak wisely back to you. An assumption becomes powerful not when it is spoken once, but when it is felt and accepted as natural. Words alone do not shape reality. Emotion gives them weight, texture, and permanence. Feeling is the medium through which assumptions pass from thought into form. When an idea is emotionally charged, it moves beyond the surface level of the mind and settles into the deeper layers where creation begins. This is why two people can repeat the same words, yet only one sees results. One speaks from effort, the other from inner conviction. Every feeling you repeatedly experience is an agreement with a certain version of life. When you feel anxious, you are assuming something is wrong or about to go wrong. When you feel calm, you are assuming safety and order. These assumptions may not be consciously chosen, but they are continuously reinforced through emotional reaction. The subconscious does not respond to logic or reasoning, it responds to feeling. It accepts what you emotionally experience as true and works to externalize it without question. This explains why deeply emotional moments leave lasting imprints. A single experience charged with fear, shame, or joy can define patterns that last for years. The feeling acts like cement, locking the assumption into place. If you felt rejected once and accepted that feeling as truth, life may continue presenting situations that mirror rejection. Not because it must, but because the feeling was never replaced. What is felt deeply enough becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes normal, even if it is painful. Many people try to change their lives by changing their thoughts while leaving their emotional state untouched. This creates inner conflict. The mind says things are getting better, while the feeling says nothing has changed. Reality follows the feeling. To truly shift an assumption, you must shift the emotional state you return to most often. This is not about forcing happiness or denying challenges. It is about selecting the feeling that aligns with the outcome you desire and resting in it until it feels natural. The feeling of fulfillment must come before the fulfillment itself. This is where most people struggle. They wait for circumstances to give them permission to feel peace, confidence, or gratitude, but the law works in reverse. Feeling is the cause, not the reward. When you feel successful internally, success begins moving toward you. When you feel secure within, security manifests without. Life does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are emotionally agreeing with now. Emotion also determines how quickly an assumption hardens into fact. A weakly felt idea may take time to show results, while a strongly felt assumption manifests rapidly. This is why fear-based expectations often come to pass so quickly. They are emotionally intense. The same intensity, when directed toward faith, calm certainty, and expectation of good, produces equally powerful outcomes. The energy you attach to an assumption accelerates its expression. You must also understand that feelings do not need to be dramatic to be effective. Quiet confidence is often more potent than excitement. A settled sense of this is done carries more creative power than emotional highs followed by doubt. The goal is not emotional excess, but emotional consistency. What you return to again and again becomes your emotional home, and life builds according to that address. When you imagine a desired outcome, do not focus on the details first. Focus on the feeling it would bring. Would it bring relief, joy, freedom, gratitude? Enter that feeling now, even briefly, and allow it to soak into your awareness. In that moment, you are no longer asking, you are agreeing. The subconscious registers this agreement and begins aligning behavior, perception, and opportunity to match it. This alignment feels effortless because it is internal before it is external. Old feelings may surface as you practice this. Doubt, frustration, or impatience may attempt to reclaim their place. Do not fight them. Fighting gives them energy. Simply return to the chosen feeling again and again. Each return weakens the old pattern and strengthens the new one. Over time, the emotional landscape shifts, and with it, the facts of your life. Feeling is not a reaction to reality. It is a signal sent ahead of it. When you master your emotional state, you master the assumptions that govern your experiences. What you feel to be true today is quietly becoming tomorrow's evidence. The moment an assumption is planted, the mind expects instant confirmation, yet reality operates through a process of unfolding rather than immediacy. Many abandon their assumption not because it is false, but because they misinterpret time as opposition. Time is not working against you, it is working through you. An assumption does not fail because results are delayed. It fails only when persistence ends. What appears as waiting is often the invisible stage where belief is consolidating into form. Every assumption enters a period of incubation. Just as a seed disappears into the soil before it breaks the surface, an inner conviction settles into the subconscious before it can be expressed outwardly. During this phase, nothing seems to be happening, yet everything is happening. The subconscious is reorganizing perception, behavior, and opportunity to match the accepted belief. The absence of visible movement is not evidence of stagnation, it is evidence of preparation. Most people mistake silence for failure. They assume that if nothing has changed on the outside, nothing has changed on the inside. This is rarely true. The inner shift often precedes external change by days, weeks, or even months. When you persist in an assumption despite neutral or contradictory circumstances, you are declaring loyalty to the unseen. That loyalty is what solidifies belief. The mind must choose which version of reality it will serve, the old evidence or the new conviction. Persistence forces that choice. Repetition is the mechanism through which persistence operates. Every time you return to the same assumption, you deepen its impression. This is not about mechanical repetition of words, but repeated acceptance. Each return says, "This is still true," regardless of what appears otherwise. Over time, the assumption becomes familiar, and familiarity breeds inevitability. What once felt forced becomes natural. What felt hopeful becomes expected. Time also reveals where belief is genuine and where it is conditional. If belief collapses the moment circumstances challenge it, it was not belief, it was preference. True assumption remains steady even when the outer world lags behind. This steadiness removes emotional volatility. Instead of rising and falling with appearances, you maintain an inner posture of certainty. That posture communicates authority to the subconscious, and the subconscious responds with obedience. There is a reason why sudden breakthroughs often follow long periods of nothing. The outer change is rarely gradual because the inner acceptance often reaches a tipping point. Persistence accumulates momentum. Each moment of consistency adds pressure until reality yields all at once. What looks like a miracle to others is often the result of quiet endurance. You did not change overnight. You remained faithful longer than doubt expected. The danger of abandoning an assumption too soon is that it reinforces the belief that effort is required for belief to work. When you quit, you teach the mind that circumstances have the final say. This strengthens dependence on external validation and weakens inner authority. Persistence, on the other hand, trains the mind to trust its own acceptance rather than appearances. This trust is what eventually shortens the time between assumption and manifestation. It is important to understand that persistence does not mean obsession. Obsession implies anxiety and impatience, which signal doubt. Persistence is calm, steady, and confident. It is returning to the assumption because it feels right, not because you are trying to force an outcome. When you persist from peace, time becomes an ally rather than a threat. You no longer measure progress by external change, but by internal stability. Challenges often intensify just before an assumption solidifies. Old patterns surface not to stop you, but to be replaced. This is the subconscious clearing space. If you misinterpret this as failure, you retreat at the very moment momentum is strongest. When you recognize it as part of the process, you remain unmoved. That immovability is what allows the new assumption to take hold fully. Persistence also reshapes identity. Over time, you stop being someone who is trying to believe and become someone who simply believes. This shift in identity is crucial. Reality responds more readily to who you are than to what you want. When belief becomes part of your self-concept, results follow naturally. There is no longer a gap between assumption and expectation. They are one. The passage of time is not a test of worthiness, it is a test of consistency. Every day you maintain the assumption, you are choosing alignment over appearance. Eventually, alignment becomes dominant and appearance must conform. Time does not delay manifestation, it reveals commitment. Faith is not an emotional surge that comes and goes with circumstances, it is a settled assumption that the end is already secure. It is the quiet decision to live from fulfillment rather than anticipation. When you assume the outcome as complete before evidence appears, you remove struggle from the process. There is no chasing, no begging, no convincing, only alignment. Faith in its pure form is the acceptance of an unseen reality as present fact. Most people misunderstand faith as hope stretched over time. Hope waits, watches, and worries. Faith rests. Faith does not ask whether it will happen. It assumes it has happened in principle and allows details to arrange themselves. This is why faith brings peace even before change appears. When the mind accepts completion, the nervous system relaxes. That relaxation signals trust, and trust accelerates alignment. Assuming the end does not mean ignoring responsibilities or abandoning action. It means that action flows from certainty rather than fear. When you assume success, your decisions become clearer. You no longer act to prove worth or earn results. You act because the path feels obvious. Effort decreases as accuracy increases. This is the difference between forced motion and inspired movement. The greatest obstacle to faith is the demand for proof. The moment you require evidence before acceptance, you reverse the law. Evidence follows belief, it does not precede it. Waiting to believe until you see results is like waiting for a shadow before standing in the light. Faith accepts first, and reality confirms later. This sequence is fixed, whether you are aware of it or not. Living from the end reshapes how you interpret events. Delays no longer signal failure, they signal adjustment. Obstacles no longer feel threatening, they feel temporary. Even contradictions lose their emotional charge because they are no longer final. When the end is assumed, the middle cannot intimidate you. You move through challenges with composure, knowing they do not define the destination. Faith also dissolves desperation. Desperation comes from believing something is missing. When you assume fulfillment internally, lack loses its grip. You may still desire, but you do not cling. You move forward without urgency, and that absence of pressure allows things to come together naturally. Life responds more readily to calm expectation than to anxious pursuit. Assuming the end requires discipline of attention, you must repeatedly return to the inner state that matches completion. This does not mean constant visualization or mental strain. It means choosing interpretations that align with fulfillment. When something goes wrong, you do not panic. You adjust the story you tell yourself. When progress seems slow, you remind yourself that the outcome is settled. Each return strengthens faith and weakens doubt. One of the most powerful shifts occurs when you stop asking, "How will this happen?" and start assuming that it will. The need to know how is often a disguise for mistrust. Faith does not require a map, it requires direction. When the end is clear, the path reveals itself step by step. Clarity of outcome invites clarity of action. Faith also transforms patience. Patience is no longer passive waiting, it becomes confident allowance. You are not waiting for life to change, you are allowing it to catch up. This changes how time feels. Days no longer drag with expectation, they unfold with quiet assurance. Time becomes a collaborator rather than an obstacle. When faith is practiced consistently, it reshapes identity. You stop identifying as someone striving for change and become someone who expects good. This expectation is subtle but powerful. It influences posture, tone, decisions, and reactions. Others sense it without understanding it. Opportunities align because your internal state matches their arrival. Assuming the end is the highest form of trust. It is the decision to live as though the promise is already kept. When this assumption becomes natural, effort fades and results follow. Faith does not force reality, it allows it.